Hello everyone, my name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm coming at you with another classic shelf video, and it's concerning a bunch of classics that I think are great for beginners. So if you want to get into classics, a lot of people are like, where do I start? Because there are so many classics out there that it is honestly a little overwhelming. It's still overwhelming for me, and I've been in the classics world now for at least 4 years with my university career, and when you have classics out there like Les Miserables or Charles Dickens' Great Expectations or anything like that, you're just like, but I don't really want to read all these like super dense, super big classics to start off with. So today's video is a little bit about that. I've been planning this video for a little while now. I've made a list of my own recommendations, and I've asked my friends what kind of recommendations they have, because honestly I haven't read that many classics, so I'm not entirely versed, and like I can't like give you a 100% be like, I've read every classics in the world, here are my recommendations on which you should start with. I can't do that. I don't think anybody can. So to get started today, I'm going to start off with my recommendations, and then I'm going to have my friends' recommendations afterwards, and a few honorary mentions that I've kind of found on my shelves. So to start off, I gave this book a fair amount of thought, because as I was studying it this year, I was studying it and I was like, this is actually kind of denser than I thought, and it's got a lot more layers than I thought it would. And I was like, I don't know if like some people might get bored with the beginning of it or something if they were just starting off with classics with this one, but I'm going to recommend it anyways because it is amazing. It's one of my favorite classics, and as the first one that I'm recommending, I was kind of a little iffy about sharing it with you guys as like, you should read this if you're a beginner into classics, because I think it actually is a little more dense than I realized. I studied it in university this past year, and as I was studying it I realized exactly how rich this book is, and I read it well into my university career. So I was like, I don't know if this would be a very good beginner's book, but then I talked myself into it, and all my friends, every single one of them, when I asked them the question, what classics book would you recommend a beginner to classics, every single one of them said Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. And then I was kind of sitting there and I was like, you know what? Yes, because this book is probably, arguably, one of the most popular pulp culture books right now. We have so many retellings out there for this book that are coming out. Off the top of my head, there's like Pride and Prejudice and Mistletoe, or Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, or Pride by Iggy Zaboy, or the one that I just saw today at the bookstore, actually, Pride and Prejudice and Other Recipes. And this story is iconic. And I chose it as well because this story has been done in movie form or miniseries form, which makes it a lot easier to consume this story. So if you were confused by it, or if you just didn't quite grasp it right away, you could go watch the movie and then come back to the book and then you'd understand it, or you could go watch the BBC miniseries and come back and read a little bit more, because the BBC miniseries is like six pieces, 6 different shows, I believe it's 6, and then you could like, you know, kind of understand where you're coming from when you're reading this. I also think that this is a fantastic place to start as well, because Jane Austen's writing is so incredibly witty and intelligent, and just, it's funny and it's really self-aware, and this story is just so wonderful. I think it's a fantastic place to start for classics as well, because it's a woman writer, and right now in our political climate I suggest women writers. Which leads me into the second book, Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. This one I think is a better bet than Pride and Prejudice, just slightly, because Northanger Abbey is a lot, it doesn't, you can't really tell, but it's smaller than Pride and Prejudice. It is much faster read, and it's not nearly as, you know, And it's not nearly as complex and full of richness as Pride and Prejudice is. And this one is also incredibly, incredibly funny. Jane Austen herself breaks the fourth wall in this. She speaks directly to the readers and just rants about stuff all the time, which I think is hilarious. And the whole premise of this is that Catherine Morland... I didn't give you the premise of this one. I mean, you kind of know. It's like Mr. Darcy is... I'm not going to restart this video. So the premise of this one is it's a love story kind of thing. So we have the 5 Bennet sisters. We have Jane, Lizzie, Kitty, oh my god, Mary, and Lydia. Wow, I'm losing my mind. So we have the 5 Bennet sisters and their mom and their father, and they're kind of poor, and their father's estate is going to go to the next male heir in the family, which is a guy named Mr. Collins, and he's kind of awful. And then one day, this young man, this eligible young bachelor, moves into the area, and his name is Mr. Bingley, and he brought along his sister and his best friend, Mr. Darcy. And, you know, things ensue. People get married, people fall in love, that kind of stuff. For Northanger Abbey, we have Catherine Morland, who is a small town girl who has never been released into society, and so she goes and stays with her aunt, I do believe. I don't know, someone. She goes and stays with someone in Bath, where she ends up meeting Henry Tilney and his family, and she gets like taken to their manor basically, or their abbey, and it's called Northanger Abbey. And there she starts to feel like something's happening. There's a mystery here. Catherine Morland is an avid reader. She has just finished Anne Radcliffe's Castle of Otranto in this. And so everywhere she looks, it's gothic. It's really funny because it's like, it's not scary, this book. It's spoopy. Like, I loved this because I got to read it in school around Halloween, and it was just perfect timing. Because like the atmosphere is gothic-y but with hilarity attached, and that's my kind of scary story that I like. So these are my 2 Jane Austen recommendations for you to start with. My next recommendation for you guys to start with, if you're getting into classics, is something more of a short story route. So I know that, again, this particular author, all of his stories are in the popular culture realm, due to Sherlock, the show, and the 2 movies done with Robert Downey Jr. But, so Arthur Conan Doyle, he's written so many short stories that concern Sherlock Holmes and John Watson. So I have both here. I have Sherlock Holmes, the complete novels and short stories. And I think this is a fantastic place to start with if you want something that's classic in nature but shorter and actually really quite interesting. So I myself have only read one of the Sherlock Holmes stories, and I read it for university, and it was the Adventure of the Speckled Band, and it is very, very Sherlock-y and also quite gay, but I think it went really fast considering it is a short story of his, not one of Arthur Conan Doyle's novels itself. So I suggest, if you really like the crime type or mystery type of genre, or if you're like me and you just really like the show Sherlock, these are a great place to start if you're looking to dive into classics. So my next recommendation is something that, again, a lot of my friends have come out and said this would be a perfect place to start. And this was actually the very first book on my list of places to start with classic literature. I read this in my 2nd year of university, and I actually found that it was a lot easier than a lot of other classics that I've read before. So, and it was a lot more like suspenseful, and things were happening, and I found the writing a lot easier to follow with. Now, a lot of my classic reading throughout school I've done with an audiobook in my ear, because it like helps me, it helps the prose go, because, you know, if you're reading Charles Dickens, a lot of his sentences are just huge and really descriptive and stuff like that, so I needed something in my ear. But I found with picture of Dorian Gray, I didn't need that at all. So this is by Oscar Wilde, and Oscar Wilde is a playwright, or was a playwright, he's not still alive, who dabbled only once in novellic literature, and I absolutely adore this book. It was my favorite classics book for such a long time. And you know what? This story is incredible. So it's about this kid named Dorian Gray, and at 18 Dorian is coveted by this painter named Basil, or Basil I guess, because British. And he sits for Basil a lot to paint his portrait and all this kind of stuff. And at the beginning of this book, one of his portraits gets shown to Dorian and one of Dorian's friends, Lord Henry Wotton, who, just as a side note, is awful human being. And Dorian ends up wanting this canvas. He doesn't want Basil to sell it anywhere. So he takes it and basically sells his soul to this painting, or like to the devil, I guess, if you wanted to go that way. It's kind of like, it's very subtle, the like transaction-y type thing, but from that point forward, Dorian never ages. He is continuously beautiful, he is continuously young and youthful. So even when Dorian is 35, he still looks like he's 18, and he does all these completely awful, soul-ripping things. Like he ends up being the, no, I won't tell you. No spoilers, but he is an awful human being, but he doesn't age, and he's continuously youthful. And people are starting to whisper, like, what is his secret? What is he doing? What did he do to be still looking this youthful? And the truth is, because he sold his soul to this painting, everything that he does that his soul looks like, his painting is starting to look like. So by the end of this book, his painting looks like a complete madman. Like, think Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Like, Dr. Jekyll is beautiful and whatever, and then Mr. Hyde is this awful, monstrous looking human. That's what Dorian's picture looks like. And this book is a commentary on like psychology, what makes a good human, and what it really means to do all these awful things, like what it does to you as a person. If you're looking for something that's a little bit fantasy-esque, or if you're looking for something that's a little bit more mystery, but not like quite to the Sherlock extent, go with this. So my second to last recommendation today is Dracula by Bram Stoker. This book is fantastic. So I've seen I've seen like a few videos, recommendations where you should start with classic books, and a lot of them have said Frankenstein. Now, I totally disagree. I think Frankenstein is completely too dense and really quite boring and awful for beginners. And so when I was thinking along the lines of like, what are some really famous classics other than the ones that I've already talked about that could be good for beginners? And I remembered Dracula. And also all my friends told me Dracula is amazing. And because again, it is so steeped in popular culture right now and has been for almost like a full century now, this is a wonderful place to go. So if you don't know what Dracula is about, so it's a ragtag team of friends who are tasked to deal with this Count Dracula fellow from Transylvania. So it is a commentary on the English fear of the foreign, of the other, of the immigration kind of thing that's like going to destroy their Englishness. So yes, it is problematic. Along with every other classic in the world, it is incredibly problematic, but this is also arguably an incredibly advanced classic because it deals with so much technology at the time. This was written to near the end of the Victorian era, and Bram Stoker dealt with a bunch of different new types of technology that were coming out. The doctor in here, I can't remember his name, but he is a psychologist, I do believe, and so he records all his findings with a few of his patients, especially this one who is like eats birds and cats and stuff, and he like goes between like waves of like complete lunacy to complete normalcy, and it's freaking him out, and it's a little strange. So this doctor, he records all of his findings on this like brand new thing, and it's like this wax. I studied it in class, and my friend is going to be yelling at me as to what it's called, but I'm not going to look it up. And it has a team of like a band of people who get together to like save the world. So if you like things like Six of Crows, or I'm trying to think, like Gilded Wolves has a team of people. There's a lot of books now that are coming out that have like a team of people that get together to solve this mystery or to do something or to save the world. And this has that in it. Also, vampires. Now, my last recommendation before I get on to my friend's recommendations today is a classic that kind of isn't as old as those other classics, and it's Canadian. And it's more of a children's classic, but it is still enjoyed to this day by many people. I read it for the first time last summer, the very first one at least, and that is Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. Now, if you don't know, this is a Canadian story about a girl named Anne, and she is an orphan who gets adopted by this brother and sister at PEI, on the island of PEI, and she goes and lives there, and like the first book is her adventures as a child, and then like the second one she gets older, and then eventually you have her children and when she's married and that kind of stuff in the series. But I adore this first book. It is so wonderful. I love it. I love PEI. I've never been, but like this just made me want to go so much more. And it's Canadian, which is amazing. But yes, this is also a good place to start if you're looking for something that's really quite easy to get into, because this is written for children. It's not like, you know, Dick and Jane or Dr. Seuss easy. It's more along the lines of like, I'm trying to think, but all I can think of are the recommendations my friends have. It's fantastic. It's like an upper level middle grade classic. So like, you know how The Hobbit was written for children, but like all of us read it now. It's kind of like that. It's just beautiful. It's a beautiful story, and it's so lovely, and I just can't say enough about it. So before I get into my friends' recommendations, I have a few honorable mentions that I wanted to add into here. One of them I haven't personally read, but one of them I have, but it's been such a long time that I'm not exactly sure where I would put it as to easeability. But I do know that because I read it so long ago and it was part of my like grade 9 curriculum, I think it would be pretty okay to recommend to you guys. So that first one is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I forgot her name for a second. This book is great. It has been a while since I read it, so it's basically, it's an American classic, which I usually don't particularly like as much as my British classics. Like, I did have to read The Adventures of Huck Finn in one of my classes, and I wasn't as big of a fan as it as I was of, like, I don't know, everything else that I've mentioned today. But this one is, I think, one of the better ones out there. It is a commentary on race, on kindness, and it's set in a little southern town in the US, and it's from the point of view of Scout, this 9-year-old girl. 9-year-old? Sure, we'll say she's 9. I'm not sure, you guys can correct me in the comments if you know. But this one is just, it's really good from what I remember. I remember being really captivated by it. And again, it's got great commentary on what happens in the world, and because it plays the race commentary, I think this is a great one to read nowadays. So my last kind of recommendation, side note one, is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I have not read this one. I have heard, though, through the internet and just being around enough people, that this is a lot of people's favorite classics. And I really enjoyed the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio in it, and I think the story is really interesting, but again, it's an American classic, and I'm just not intrigued by it enough to pick it up right away, or right now anyways, but I have heard that it's wonderful, and because it's one of the ones that a lot of people love. I think that a lot of people that aren't even in literature areas like I am, like just people who are in other respects and don't necessarily read a lot of classics do love this book. And it's very, very small. Like, it is, I would argue, like 180 pages, maybe. It's very, very small. So it would be a fast read and a good start to your classics journey. I asked my friends what they would also recommend to beginners in the classics realm, and a lot of them said Pride and Prejudice and Dracula and the ones that I've already brought up. But a few that my friends have brought up that I wanted to also mention are as follows. So I only have 2 of them here with me, but I will also read you some that they have commented on my group chat. So one of my friends said, alongside Anne of Green Gables, there's also Pollyanna, which is, I guess, like an American version, basically, of like a young girl growing up. I've never heard of it before, but she said apparently it's in the same vein as Anne of Green Gables, so for like little girls kind of thing, but also very readable now. She also said A Little Princess and The Secret Garden. I've heard both of those are amazing. I really enjoyed A Little Princess, the movie that was released a long time ago. I remember watching it all the time when I was younger, and it was one of my favorites. So she loves those books, as always. She also recommends Chronicles of Narnia, again, which I have not read, but I've heard because it's an older book, it is considered a classic, and especially a children's classic. She also recommends Of Mice and Men, which I know nothing about. She says it's very short, brutal, but very good. So if you're looking for something along those lines. And then they were also recommending number 1, Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens, and number 2, Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Now, I've only read Oliver Twist. I haven't read Little Women yet, but I've heard that this one is amazing, and a lot of people really, really, really love this and the movie version of it. I know there's another movie version coming out, I think Christmas-y time. Just hit myself in the face with the book. It's great. But it's, again, young adult literature, classics version, I guess would be the best way to say it. So this one apparently is very, very good. And then Oliver Twist, again, is really good. If you're looking to get into like Charles Dickens specifically, go with Oliver Twist first. I wouldn't say venture into the Hard Times or the Great Expectations area, because it is very dense and there's a lot of characters to keep track of. There still is in Oliver Twist, but I think it's a little bit easier to follow. So it's about an orphan boy who gets moved around a lot and picked up by random people, and then gets like his whole family ripped apart, and like he finds people who never knew he was family with, and it's a lot. It's a lot, but it's very, very good. So that is everything I have for you guys today. I really hope you enjoyed. Comment down below some of your favorite classics if you read classics, or if one of these actually intrigues you enough to pick them up and try a classic for the first time. I would really love to know. Make sure to like this video, it really helps me out, and subscribe down below and hit the little bell icon to know when I upload. And make sure to follow me in my socials. They're in the description bar. I am a bookstagrammer first and foremost over anything else, and I love my bookstagram. I post every day. And then I have a Twitter, a book Twitter, that like nobody follows me on, but please follow me on it. I comment about McFlurries and how tired I am. It's fun. But yes, so that is all I have, and I'm gonna leave it here. I will see you guys at another video soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.